Ahoy! The combined update of episode 32 and 33 has finally arrived to Europe, and with that the Myth level system as well. This video will attempt to help you find out where to farm Myth XP for the most optimal game. Now, you might not know what the Myth level system is, and I originally planned to release a dedicated video for each of the most significant features of the update, including that, but that will have to be delayed a bit. Don't worry though, because they are still coming, and I think you will like the reason of the delay. The reason is a new giveaway. Our kind game masters decided to allow all influencers to host a giveaway for some amazing blessing beads of superior grade that last 30 days each. So this video is the one where you will be able to participate in the giveaway. Perhaps you remember my previous such video? Well, it's going to be similar now as well. Please read the video's description on how to participate. Within 1 week, 12 lucky winners will be selected at random from the people who successfully complete the challenge. So let's begin. The list of dungeons where you can currently gain Myth XP is listed here, and I think you can forget about the first 4 as those are way too difficult to farm for Myth XP, as well as Garden of Dust. So let's start with Abandoned City. During the video I used the same gear, buffs and potions and tactics I usually use for solo runs to minimize completion time. I also did not go out of the way to kill more monsters than necessary unless it was during waiting times. Also, every dungeon was run at level 0, so you might be able to get better results if you're strong enough to boost difficulty. And all of them were done during an XP boost event, so in total I had 512% bonus to my Myth XP gain. Abandoned City being quite hard, I was reluctant to include it in the list, but I guess there are plenty of people running it in small parties for the penetration rune, so decided to keep it after all. The result was roughly 10 billion Myth XP, which is not bad, but considering a run took me almost 9 minutes to finish, it wasn't impressive at all. Next on the list was Devil's Tower Part 2. Both Devil's Tower dungeons are well known for their amazing XP gain, which is mostly the reason why people who weren't max level yet were running them daily. This is also the reason why they are restricted to 2 runs a day. And DT2 didn't disappoint either, with a total of 25.3 billion Myth XP in under 5 minutes. This would be a very impressive result, but unfortunately you cannot enter this dungeon more than twice a day. Next up is Tower of the Dead B3F. Now, Elite version is on the list too, but earlier I mentioned I'd be running every dungeon at level 0, and from the perspective of XP gain, Elite version is the exact same as the normal version, just boosted to something like level 2, so Elites are disqualified. The result was nearly 7 billion Myth XP in around 5 minutes. Next up, the FOR EU DX dungeons. Frozen Canyon is the fastest one for me personally, and it actually has plenty of monsters to kill as well. This could be disadvantage to bladers, but it's ideal for XP gain for classes with decent area hits, like Wizard for example. Unfortunately, there was mention in the patch notes of the last update of a decrease in XP from the mobs that spawn before the second boss to prevent players from abusing the infinitely respawning monsters. But still, it gave me almost 8 billion Myth XP in 2.5 minutes. Ancient Tomb has plenty of monsters all around, which is usually annoying when running the dungeon, as they have very small hitboxes, so even for a wizard it's hard to hit them all effectively. Surprisingly, even with all those monsters, its XP yield was slightly worse than that of Frozen Canyon, with 7.5 billion of Myth XP in over 3.5 minutes. Flame Nest also has some enemies, but I believe among the UDX dungeons it might have the fewest. However, looking at the results, surprisingly it was Flame Nest that yielded the most Myth XP, almost 10 billion of it in a bit over 3 minutes, which is impressive. Therminus Machina is the last one, which also has plenty of enemies spawning all around. Fortunately, their hitbox is considerably large, so it's easy to lure them and hit them all, even for less area of effect friendly classes. In my test it yielded 8.5 billion Myth XP in roughly 3.5 minutes. Next up is Radiant Hall Apocrypha, or IC2 Apocrypha if you prefer. Quick note, if you change the camera view from free view to anything else, the dungeon's loading time will be more reasonable. Plenty of monsters here too, with 2 bosses spawning extra mobs, so in the end I gained over 6 billion Myth XP in just over 1.5 minutes, which is very impressive. And if you kill the last boss a bit slower, you might even gain more. Devil's Tower Part 1 is the next on our list, which, similarly to DT2, is limited to 2 runs a day but famous for its high XP yield. It's similar in terms of Myth XP 2, with my test run giving me almost 12.5 billion Myth XP in under 3 minutes, but once again you can't farm this dungeon indefinitely with the entry limit. Next up is Edge of Phantom, a dungeon infamous for its costly entry but a popular choice for people who want something challenging that can be finished quickly. XP gain isn't bad either, with 4.4 billion Myth XP in under 1.5 minutes. Holia Keldasril, also known as the Second Wing Dungeon, or HK for short, resulted in close to 10 billion Myth XP, which is quite impressive for a run finished under 2 minutes. However, unfortunately this dungeon is limited to 2 runs a day too, to limit the speed at which people can farm their wing levels. This also limits Myth XP gain. Illusion Castle Underworld Apocrypha, or ICA for short, is probably one of the fastest dungeons out there if your character is geared up well enough for it. But a good deal of the monsters that would grant us some precious XP are kind of out of the way and not required to be killed to progress the dungeon, so I left most of them around. This way a run gave me a bit over 3 billion Myth XP in just over 1 minute. Next up is a Charon Arena, a big time favorite of many people farming event items during collect and exchange events. Even if you don't focus on killing mobs in the first few areas, there are plenty of them that have to be killed, and the second boss spawns many minions as well. So all in all, one would expect decent amounts of XP from it. I was slightly disappointed with only around 3 billion Myth XP in a run that took nearly 2 minutes. Tower of the Dead Part 2 is next, a dungeon that's very unpopular because bosses have plenty of HP, there are several places where you have to wait for spawns and lots of distance to cover. It is really impressive for XP gain on characters between level 160 and 190 though. It's decent for players with myth levels too, my test run giving me almost 6 billion myth XP, but a run took over 3.5 minutes, so all in all it's not that impressive. Pandemonium is next, a dungeon with quite a lot of potential for farming for XP due to the demons spawning in that corridor, but I did not focus on them this time. So the whole run gave me less than 4 billion myth XP in just over 2 minutes. Guess you could work that up to 5 or 6 easily without spending much more time in there. A vacant Forbidden Island is next on the list. Have you ever heard of anyone farming that dungeon for XP? Well, me neither. And based on the results, there's a good reason for that. A full run in hard mode gave me just over 1 billion myth XP, and it took over 5 minutes to finish it, resulting in, so far, the worst XP yield. Anyway, let's move on to Holy Wind Hill, the first wing dungeon. This one is decent to run for XP on lower level characters, especially for those who wish to progress their wings while at it too. And for myth XP it seems it isn't bad either. Over 6 billion of it in my test run in under 3 minutes. If this dungeon wasn't limited to 3 runs a day, it would be decent enough to spam it too. A Vacant Hazard Valley used to be a pretty good dungeon for XP farming, but over the years developers increased the XP gain in almost every other dungeon that's available at its level, while this one remained unchanged for the most part. As such, it's pretty bad for myth XP too, as expected. Less than 1.5 billion in almost 3 minutes is not impressive at all. A Vacant FT2 and FT2, well, to be frank, I wasn't sure why they'd include those. There never really was any point in running either of those for XP, even at lower levels, and even while giving them a try for myth XP, the results were quite conclusive. Don't farm those for myth XP. Less than 1.5 billion from each, and they take a lot of time with the running back and forth. Macvinus Outpost is next, and as discussed earlier, Elite version will not be tested here. This dungeon actually has very impressive XP gain for characters under level 160, unfortunately it's very ineffective for players who are higher than the level of its mobs, and with all the waiting times, you probably spend as much time waiting for spawns and running around as you do fighting. So it resulted in almost 2 billion myth XP, which wouldn't be so bad if it hadn't been for the over 7 minutes it took to finish it. And I left Chaos Arena level 7 for the last one because my buffs would have run out otherwise. And in this dungeon you can kill the mobs during the waiting time. As such, you can also just run it in AFK mode, entering, opening the gate, then coming back 5 minutes later to kill everything. A test run gave me more than 4 billion myth XP for spending a bit more than 6 minutes inside, but once again, I basically entered the dungeon, then went to work on this video for the next 5 minutes, so comparing XP per minute rating here makes little sense. So let's compare the results in an Excel sheet. Let's add some sorting to it based on the Myth XP per minute score. Now we can see the first 3 of our ranking are the dungeons where the run count is limited. So my first bit of advice about Myth level is to keep running those dungeons daily if you need craft materials or wing XP or something, but otherwise it seems Radiant Hall Apocrypha might be the best one to farm if you intend to do more runs on the same day. But you won't go very wrong with any of the UDX dungeons or Edge of Phantom, though I'd like to add that if we compare the entry cost of Edge of Phantom to the rest, it surpasses almost all of them. What I would not recommend are the bottom 5, and while CA7 ended up with a pretty bad XP per minute ratio, it is still pretty good if you have other things to do and can pay full attention to the game non-stop. So that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video and could complete the link to participate in the giveaway. Let me know what you think in the comments. Ahoy!